Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I see you guys signing on a little at a time. It's good to see you. I figured I would sign on just a minute or so early to make sure Instagram is following, and they're not. So let me get Instagram set up here, guys. I'm so glad to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in a long time, even though we just did a video. I don't know what's with that, but I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. I think this is going to be a conversation. Bear with me as I try to get Instagram hooked up here. But I feel like this is going to be a very interesting conversation, and maybe a much needed one, because I think a lot of you, and I can also safely say this for my clients as well, I think a lot of you have people in your life who are quote unquote unstable. And the word for that could also be disturbed. And yet they don't either seek treatment or they don't feel that their symptoms are enough to go get help for. And I'm going to break down some things and give you some new terminology tonight as well. Or the third thing that could be the issue is nobody else around that person is impacted by their problem. So let me type this message into Instagram and I'll break down what I mean there. Give me 1 second. Okay. There we go. We're good to go. Okay. So here's what I mean by that. You could have, for example, your dad, let's say, for example, your dad is this really charming, loving, kind of man who married your narcissistic mom. He's very naive, and he has some anger issues. His wife, your mom, has been so controlling over the years that he doesn't really know how to assert his independence. He's very passive. He's very what's the word I'm looking for? Unspoken. He doesn't know how to put his words together. He doesn't know how to say, you know what, I have a brain and a heart too. Let me give you my 2 cents. Let me give you my opinion. He's always been this kind of passive father. Let's say you say, you know what, Dad, I don't like the fact that Mom runs all over you. She's always, fighting you and hurting you and saying rude and mean things to you. I want you to be able to step up, Dad, and know how to talk to Mom and be respected. Okay. If your dad has that issue, your disturbed mother, who is controlling, pushes boundaries, doesn't necessarily seem narcissistic, but she is. She has a lot of twisted characteristics, for lack of a clinical term. She may not want her husband in therapy. Why? Because his inability to communicate isn't enough of a problem for her. Does that make sense, guys? So you may run into family members, friends, people that you're just in a relationship with who don't necessarily have a mental health problem. They don't necessarily have a personality disorder, but their way of communication, their way of existing in the world can be very problematic. And this dad, for example, has very problematic bits and pieces to his ability, to not communicate, because he has to be able to communicate. He has a mind and a brain too, right? So it may not be much of a problem in his marriage, which is why, he may refuse to go to treatment. So sometimes individuals in your world who are disturbed or unstable, or they need some help, they may not go to therapy. They may not get help because it's not big enough of a problem for them to have to go seek treatment, if that makes sense. Now, in this conversation tonight, I'm going to talk about a few things you probably have never heard of. So get your pen and pencil ready, okay, guys? Because we're going to talk about, subclinical symptoms. We're going to talk about iatrogenic neurosis. I'm going to explain what that means. You're probably going to love that. And then I want to give you some signs of a person in your world who's disturbed and unstable and yet doesn't meet clinical criteria for a mental health disorder. I also want to highlight some research for you, and then highlight at the end of the live chat some of the ways that these individuals can negatively impact you. And there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of ways. So we're going to get to that. Now, let me bring up subclinical symptoms, okay? If you are in the life of somebody, you know, in your family, or just somebody that you work with, or maybe a partner who seems off kiltered, or seems a little imbalanced, or seems a little odd, seems a little bit disturbed in some ways, you may find yourself asking, how are they so capable of getting through life without getting treatment? How are they so capable of being likable, charming, engaging, and yet they think that wayward way? How are they capable of keeping a job? How are they capable of existing in a relationship? How are they capable of evading everyone? You know, and they have this thing that makes them odd, disturbed, sometimes even criminally minded. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking live about the psychology of the criminal mind. So we're going to get into that as well, because a lot of you will most likely be able to relate. And there's some things you may not even know is happening to you in your family or in a relationship. So you're going to learn that tomorrow if you join me. But you may find yourself asking, how in the world is this person existing? Well, they have what's called subclinical symptoms. Subclinical symptoms. Here's what it means. It means that they are right on the border of being diagnosed with psychosis, severe anxiety or depression, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder. They are right on the line of being diagnosed, but they don't have all of the symptoms and the behaviors necessary to be diagnosed. So the scary part with subclinical symptoms is that you may see every sign of impending doom. You may see every sign of an unstable individual who is questionable. Their behaviors are suspect, and they tend to be really odd and unstable, and yet doesn't have a diagnosis. You know something's wrong, but they are not at a place where that illness or behavioral problem or narcissistic personality, they're not at a place where they can have some kind of disruption in their occupational environment, in their home environment, and in their community. Anytime we're dealing with a person who is disturbed or unstable and yet doesn't have all the characteristics or the behaviors of being mentally unstable, we often look for three important things. One is you have to have some problems within your home environment or in your personal relationships. There also has to be some disturbance within the work environment. So your behaviors and the way that you think and behave is creating a very unstable work environment for you. The other thing is within the community. Are you problematic within the community? And do these subclinical symptoms cause problems in your close relationships? And if none of that is happening, can you imagine, guys, that this is an individual who is disturbed and unstable, and yet they can kind of evade, you know, and they can kind of get around being caught or seen through. And that is really difficult. Now, let me also say, with these kind of individuals, they are disturbed and unstable because of a few important things. One thing is that they often have an inability to test reality, meaning that everything that they do is almost in response to a fantasy, a state of mental instability, desire and what's the word? I think I already said fantasy, right? So desire and fantasy, or they have a very unstable way that they just see the world and they see life and they see dynamics and relationships. And because of that, they are disturbed and problematic. I'll give you an example. One time I was seeing a dad, he had 5 kids and from 5 different women. Okay. This was years ago when I was starting out as a clinician in a psychiatric hospital. He had been admitted onto my unit. I was one of the lead clinicians, and he was invited by my coworker to just talk to him and see if some medication might help him. And during that conversation, my client, I remember him saying to the psychiatrist, because I was there as well, I remember him saying to the psychiatrist, I love kids, but I just believe kids should be able to consent to sexual behavior by the age of 9. I think they should be allowed to drink by the age of 14. They should be allowed to sleep with whomever they want to sleep with at the age of 9. We know our bodies, right? And kids at that age, and he's going on and on and on. And I just sat there in complete shock, okay? And this was literally my 3rd month of being a clinical lead at the hospital. And I really wasn't prepared for his kind of neurosis or psychosis. That was a major learning experience. And, I think I just clung on to my coworker psychiatrist, and I'm like, please don't leave me. I can't figure this out. This is so weird, And after a little bit more information about his background, I was able to tie him to NAMBLA. If you Google NAMBLA, you should be able to see what that is. And it's basically an underground organization that desires really unstable things between adults and children, mainly men with young boys. And so that's all I'm going to give you on that. But he was very, very odd, okay? And did he meet diagnostic criteria for anything that he was in the hospital for? No. He was actually discharged from the hospital with anxiety. That's it. Was he disturbed? Extraordinarily. Extraordinarily. Did anybody see what was wrong? Maybe my psychiatrist coworker and me, maybe some of the nurses, but he was an attorney. And so he had a career. He had some decent income, and there were no other signs of him having any kind of clinical syndrome or symptoms that would categorize him as completely unstable. He was right on the cusp, right on the line of falling into some kind of severe mental illness, but he just wasn't there yet. So he was discharged as anxiety. But you can guarantee that I made sure that I documented he had very odd and weird ideas and concepts about children and adults, So that's an example of that. Disturbance, but you're not quite there yet. Now, let me mention a couple more things before I go to the chat box and engage you guys and see what you were saying. Most research on emotionally disturbed individuals highlights that there's often a lack of boundaries. There's a lot of boundary testing with these kind of people, and especially if there is some kind of comfort level there. So let's say, for example, your brother, he's always been very tricky. His personality is checkered. It's like playing chess every time you have a conversation with him. Does he need to be in the hospital? No. Has he threatened anybody? No. Is he a safety concern to himself or others? No. But has he done some really bizarre, odd things? Yes. And so because of that, he's really odd. He can be problematic, and he can really walk that line of psychosis. He's not quite there yet, but he can get there. So let's say this is your brother, okay? There's a comfort level with our siblings, right? I know that I can just go up to my big brother and hug him. He wouldn't think anything of it. I know that I could, make fun of my younger brother who's really kind of on the geeky side, and he knows that I'm just playing with him. There's a comfort level there, right? When there's a comfort level with people who are emotionally disturbed, sometimes their behaviors are shown more with you because there's a comfort level there. So your brother, right, for example, could test boundaries with you and do some really inappropriate things. Why? Because there is a level of comfort there. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anything that's illegal, like sexual abuse, physical abuse, nothing like that. But he could cross the line with you many times. Why? Because he's already emotionally disturbed. He's psychologically odd and just kind of isolated. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit as well. And then on top of that, there's a comfort level because you're his sibling. Now, research with disturbed individuals suggests that they often have a lack of emotion regulation. So, a lot of times, these individuals may not necessarily come across as threatening to themselves or others, but it's really hard for them to stay calm, cool, collected. It's hard for them to stay focused. They often tend to have what we call labile emotions, meaning they're like a roller coaster, right? 1 minute they're okay, next minute we're going up the roller coaster. What we seem to be okay, next minute we're going down. And it's this constant cycle of instability. And it may not come around all the time. You may go 15 years and not see instability, and all of a sudden you're seeing instability. So it's a sometimes very complicated thing to put your finger on when you're dealing with a person who is disturbed. Emotion regulation, just for you guys who may want the definition, is really an attempt to alter the magnitude or quality of your emotional response. I'm going to alter the magnitude and the quality of my emotional response. If I'm snapping out and having a temper tantrum, I'm going to then engage in my emotion regulation, which is I'm going to do something to calm me down. I'm going to do something to just put my mind at ease. I'm going to do something that's going to get my mind off of this. People who are disturbed emotionally and psychologically do not have that ability. And if we throw in substance abuse, research in psychology suggests that that can make a disturbed person dangerous. The addition of substances, so mental illness and substances combined, can lead to a very dangerous, I should say, individual. Okay, let me go to the chat box, see what you guys are saying, engage you a little bit. And then we're going to talk about the signs of having somebody like this in your world, the research, and then how this impacts you. You're going to want to know how this impacts you. Okay, Mama Boom Bam, hello. Welcome. Glad to see you tonight. Always glad to see you. Welcome. Bossy Truthy 15, hello and hello. Thank you for the energy. I love that. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you as well. Nancy R, glad to see you. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Gary Bennett, hello and welcome. So glad to have you back. I'm so happy when I see repeat people come to the live chats. I'm always glad to see you. James McDonald, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. James McDonald says usually the right time to let go of a toxic family member is as soon as possible, if possible. I think so. If you're dealing with a disturbed individual who's very checkered, and what I mean by checkered, if you think of a checkerboard, it's just like all these pieces and you have to follow the board in a certain order. And if you know how to play chess, thanks to one of my kiddos that sees me for therapy, he's 15. He taught me when he was 9 how to play chess. So we've been playing chess for about 4 or 5 years together, and I've gotten pretty good. But, when you're dealing with disturbed people or individuals who are disturbed emotionally, it is like playing chess, because you've got to consider multiple times in your interactions with them. Do I need to go this way? Do I need to go that way? Well, what if I move over there? Can he get me this way? Right? And it's this constant cycle of playing chess with these kind of individuals. So if you can get away with them as soon as possible, and if that's the only and best decision that you have, yes, I think that's appropriate. Ellie Wynn, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Always glad to see you as well. Mama Boom Bam, thank you so much for that. And you're welcome. I love bringing you guys information. That's like my mission, to give you the insights that maybe you've heard and it didn't click or completely make sense, or to give you insights that you've never had. So I'm so glad when you guys tell me that. It's very helpful. Hi, Kim. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. Glad to see you. Star, welcome. Glad to see you as well. Designer Guy, hello and welcome. I did get your email, so bear with me, okay? I've just been slammed, literally slammed. Cheyenne Morgan, hello and welcome. Glad to have you, and I hope you're having a great day as well. Okay, I'm looking for comments, guys. Caitlin Brown, Kev Dower, and Dr. Robinson, hello and welcome. I'm so glad to have all three of you. Welcome. Glad you can catch us. Cheyenne Morgan, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the super chat. Cheyenne Morgan says, I take antidepressants. Yeah. I mean, there's many reasons why you may be taking them. Who knows? But let me throw this in here. I'm going to piggyback off that for a second here. That most individuals who are psychologically and emotionally disturbed and unstable, they typically don't want to, they typically do not want medication. And this is backed by research. And here's why. One piece of the puzzle is this. I don't want to come across as quote unquote sick, quote unquote crazy, mentally disturbed, uncouth. So what I'm going to do is continue down this road relationally with other people in my world, and what's going to happen is going to happen. But I am not the problem. That's typically what you're going to hear from them. Or you're going to hear, yes, I do have a few things about me that's odd and quirky, but I'm not going to take medication for it. That's their right. I get it. But some people, Cheyenne, who are disturbed, they need the medication to get their mind thinking on the right level again. Fairy Girl, always glad to see you. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Orlando, glad to see you as well. Sisters Supporting Sisters Ministries, I'm always glad to see you as well. I'm glad to see all of you. I should just say that. Just glad to see all of you. That's a hard one. Okay, I'm going to mess this up, guys. You may need to help me. Francophile, I messed that up. I know I did. Patine, please forgive me. Correct me if I'm wrong, okay? I feel like I'm wrong. Nice to have you. I'm glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I don't remember seeing you, so I'm glad to see you. And I see that you're saying that you haven't spoken to your parents since coming out a month ago. Oh boy, I watched your no contact during the holidays video, but it's going to be hard. Yeah, it is going to be hard. It's going to be hard. It is. I'm coming back the week of Christmas. So stay tuned. You may get some insights and some tips that may be helpful. Courtney Fraser, hello and welcome. I hope you're doing well. Glad to see you as well. Fairy Girl, thank you for the super chat. You've been giving me tons of super chats lately. I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much for that. Tammy Nicely, welcome to tonight's live chat. Laura Fett and Dragon Man Sasson, hello. So glad to see you both. My Lord, I'm just looking for comments. Moon Warrior, good to see you as well. Good to see you. Ronald Zion and Yo-Yo. No, Yaya. Not Yo-Yo. Yeah. Good to see you. So glad to see you. Ray Razy. Hello. Welcome to tonight's live chat. You make a good point. Kay Razy says they don't quite meet criteria for diagnosis. That is correct. And that is known as, again, subclinical symptoms. And those subclinical symptoms is what allows a psychiatrist, a therapist, even a social worker, if they have the power to, depending on where you live, to discharge from the hospital. So, let's say, for example, your mom was hospitalized because she had what seemed to be a psychotic break. But once she got to the hospital, they realized she smoked way too much marijuana and she mixed it with alcohol and she had temporary insanity, and she seems normal now. She's not scoring high on any of the assessments that they give in the hospital, those little questionnaires, and you check yes, no, or you check sometimes, always, maybe. Nothing comes back as if she has a problem. So what does that mean? Well, that means the person who's in charge of her case can say, you know what, you're discharged from the hospital. Why? Because you are not showing symptoms that are medical at this point, And if we talk about insurance companies and if we talk about decisions that hospitals have to make because of insurance companies, we can clearly see that sometimes discharging of a patient is more of a decision on the part of insurance than it is on the hospital. Either way you flip the coin, the person may be unstable and need help, but they're not showing symptoms that are quote unquote strong enough to be problematic, Yeah. Jamila Jabril, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says, a man married to mute girl harassing others for what she's mute on us. I don't see you complete that. Jamila says, my local people love strippers. Oh my Lord, that's horrible. That's horrible. Okay, I'm going to skip this one, Jamila. I'm so sorry. I don't see the rest of this. I can't make sense out of it. I'm coming back to you, though. I am. KZ says, so they have impaired reality testing? Yes. Reality testing, we're going to get into this in just a few minutes. Reality testing is the ability to look at something in reality and say, does this make sense? Or does this not make sense? Let me pull from the news, okay? Because, it's a big thing in the news. And a lot of my clients brought it up today. So I'm going to bring it up. I don't want to, but I'm going to. Okay. So Luigi Mangione, is that the way you say it? His last name? He murdered CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thomas. And if he had the ability to reality test, so just based on what we know, okay, because my clients were very disturbed by this today, primarily my clients who have United Healthcare insurance. So if we go on what's being told to us in the media and, what's going on in this situation, which may or may not be true in some aspects, how the media can be, some is truth, some is not, some is exaggerated, some is, but just based on the information that we have so far, if he were to engage in reality testing, okay, he would be able to look at that situation and say this. Number one, I'm not going to kill somebody that has had absolutely no contact with me, my family, or anybody that I've known. I'm also not going to kill someone that is attached to another family and has people who love him, just like my family loves me. And I'm certainly not going to pick a fight and a battle with somebody who most likely the family can hire the most expensive defense attorney in the whole world or the best attorney in the whole world and keep me behind bars. He would also be able to consider that if I go to prison for the rest of my life, I'm not going to be able to affect change in the positive ways that I would like to, because I'm going to be behind bars and I won't be able to say a word. You need to be free, right? In order to make a true and lasting change in the world. You can't do that if you're behind bars. Did he engage in reality testing? Most likely not. And so that's what happens with individuals who are struggling with emotional and psychological disturbance. They don't have the capacity to lay things out on the table and say, okay, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense? I really need to process this whole thing. They can only process up to a certain point and then nothing else makes sense, right? And so basically, Ray Z, there's no reality testing. So it is impaired 100%. That's the best example I can give you guys right now. Ronald Zion says pathological predator. That's a very nice way to put it. I very much agree. I'm going to star that comment, by the way, Ronald Zion, because I think that was perfectly said. Lorfit says they don't believe they have a problem. I once mentioned to my dad the importance of mental health and therapy. His response was solos locos. Ooh, girl, wait a minute. Let me look at this. Necesitan terapia. I don't know how to say that. Which basically means I don't need a doctor. I'm going to break it down for we very, very poorly put together Spanish speakers. You tested me on that one. Lorfed. Yeah, I get you. He's like, I don't need a therapist. That's what that means, guys, for those of you who want to know what that means in Spanish. I don't need a therapist. A therapist is not necessary. That's how we're going to break that down. Well, here's the thing, Lorfet. If he has this internalized pride that says, and we all know, you and me, we know that if an individual is Spanish, Puerto Rican, Latina, Latino, African American, even Native American, even Indian, the whole idea of therapy becomes a whole topic in and of itself, right? Because he may not feel like he is in a place where he needs a therapist. You know what I mean? I have a Spanish speaking client now, and I do okay with Spanish, but when we start getting into the more complex sentences, I'm like, oh my God, give me a minute to process that. Give me a minute to process what you're saying. But sometimes we do sessions in Spanish, and it's fantastic. And here's why: because she's very defensive. Is she emotionally disturbed? Yes, and she's emotionally disturbed because everything that she thinks has something to do with the government. She's not psychotic. She's not having a psychotic break. She really is delusional. But she has, we're going to get into this in just a few minutes here, guys, so bear with me. She has what we call non-bizarre delusions. Non-bizarre delusions are non-bizarre. They are beliefs that are held to be true despite evidence to the contrary, and despite, in the face of all fact and reasoning. There's no truth or any fact to what she believes, but she strongly believes it. And it's not bizarre. She's not saying that she's seen aliens. She's not saying that she's seen monsters break into her house at night. She's saying the government is watching everything that she does. They're monitoring her email. They're monitoring her work computer. They're monitoring, her Alexa communications. They're monitoring her phone calls. These are real things that could be happening. But she has delusions that are non-bizarre. And so Laura Fitz, she's Spanish. She's Puerto Rican. She speaks Spanish. We can do very basic sessions in Spanish. She does sometimes have her interpreter accompany her, and he looks stressed out. Why? Because the way that she thinks about life is so emotionally disturbed, but she is not sick. And so she's defensive because she never wants me ever to allude to the fact that she is sick. And the only reason she agreed to see me is because I'm the only bilingual therapist in my area right now. And so she's like, I will go to you then. But she's very defensive, guys. So that's another characteristic. And I should mention that while I'm on this topic with you, Laura Fit, I should also mention that there's a lot of defense mechanisms that goes up with these individuals. And they also do not want to hear you say that they're sick, because they're not. And they're so high functioning that if you say to them, okay, that you need help, that's going to shut the whole communication down. So Laura Fett, I don't know if you want your dad to still get treatment or if you feel like he would benefit from therapy, but maybe cater to his culture. Maybe he would be more open to a Spanish speaking therapist or bilingual therapist. I don't know. It's rough, right? Mr. Frederick, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. Mr. Frederick said, I've decided to let go. It's hard for them to change their behavior. Absolutely. Sometimes it is hard, right? And so you have to be the one that says adios amigos, right? So it is what it is. Okay, let me get back into the content, guys. What are the signs that you're dealing with somebody who is emotionally and psychologically disturbed, and primarily within your family? It could also be other people, but because we're a channel that looks at family, you may want to consider this within your own family. I'm sure you are. So here's what I've seen, and here's what research suggests. Research suggests that the psychologically paranoid often find themselves at a crossroads. Do I believe what my hallucinations and delusions are telling me? Or do I go get help and confirm to everybody around me that I need help? So they often find themselves at a fork in the road. Which way do I go? Research in psychology on emotionally disturbed individuals suggests that psychological paranoia and delusional thinking is often the result of their instability. But why won't they go get treatment? Well, again, because if they go get treatment, that means something is wrong, and they may not be willing to put themselves on the line like that, right? They may also be suffering from command hallucinations, which are kind of these auditory hallucinations. It could also be visual hallucinations, where they feel like something is giving them a certain facial expression, is gesturing to them to do something wrong or bad. Or the command hallucinations can be auditory, where they believe that someone and something is telling them to kill, to harm, to hurt, and to be harmful to other people. And so psychological paranoia or delusions or hallucinations is often at the seat or the core of emotional disturbance. But again, if that person goes to seek treatment, they're now confirming that they have a problem. And so a lot of times these individuals just continue on in their daily life, as if nothing is wrong. And if they are high functioning, they can get away with it. They can go to work every day and seem absolutely okay. There's no psychological issues whatsoever. Violent fantasies. That's another thing. Violent fantasies. Fantasies of sexual assault. Fantasies of, leading a home invasion. Fantasies of shooting a police saint. Or some kind of station, I should say as well. Abusing, verbally and emotionally, a bunch of psychologists or doctors on their case. They have these violent fantasies where they let their mind go way out there, They even have fantasies of killing, of murder. Are they unstable? 100%. Are they disturbed? 100%. But will they ever get help? Probably not. Why? Because, as we're going to talk about tomorrow, the psychology of the criminal mind is this: everybody else out there is wrong except for me. And so I'm trying to adjust to your craziness. So therefore, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to do something very, very bad and irreversible because I have a criminal mind. And this is how I function. So emotional and psychological disturbance in a person can be violent fantasies. Let me also throw out there delusions, bizarre and non-bizarre. Let me know if you want me to break that down for you. Hallucinations and delusions. I'm happy to do that. Perseveration or rumination is something else that happens with these kind of individuals. Rumination is that cyclic mindset of just thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. And it gets so, it gets so much attention that your mind is filled with it 24/7. Your heart is being impacted by these constant thoughts 24/7. And it almost becomes like an obsession, And individuals who are emotionally and psychologically disturbed will often have perseveration or rumination. Perseveration, you're going to hear mainly in reference to people who are on the autism spectrum, but you can most definitely use it in this context as well. The mind and the brain just get stuck on one thing, and it's hard to get them off of it. The other thing with emotionally and psychologically disturbed individuals is a psychotic break. Now, a psychotic break used to be called a nervous breakdown. And basically, that's when a person loses touch with reality temporarily. And that loss of touch with reality causes them to act in really odd and strange ways, sometimes murderous ways, right? Sometimes it could be sexual assault. Sometimes it can be disorderly conduct. They engage in some severe behavior, or they're constantly engaging in petty crimes, or constantly engaging in manipulation and triangulation and pitting family members against each other. It's repetitive to a place where it looks like this individual has completely lost their mind. But it doesn't last. And that's what's interesting here. It doesn't last. And so sometimes these individuals never get psychiatric treatment because their temporary symptoms never last long enough for them to be hospitalized, for them to be committed to a hospital, and for them to get the help that they need, you know? And so sometimes a quote unquote nervous breakdown or a psychotic break, it can be very intense for some people and they can seem really psychotic and out there, but it doesn't always last long enough for a therapist or anyone to get in and say you need help, you know? So they remain, that's my point here, they remain emotionally and psychologically disturbed. You may also see anger and hostility and major shifts in feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Emotionally and psychologically disturbed individuals may not be depressed. They may not be moody, irritable. They may not be tearful, nervous, on edge, but they are emotionally and psychologically disturbed. Why? Because there's been a complete shift in who they have been. Now they're acting like a totally different person, or now they're being very explosive and irate, or now they're talking about aliens breaking into their home every night while they're asleep. So now the door is barricaded, right? So that's a shift from normality in thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And that's an unstable and emotionally disturbed individual. May not get a clinical diagnosis, but they most definitely have a very tricky constellation of symptoms. Like the stars, constellation of stars, constellation of symptoms. It's a variety of symptoms on a spectrum that is observable to you. Okay, let me give you some research. I'm going to go back to the chat box and then let you know how this may impact you if you know somebody like this in your world or you were raised with somebody like this. Some research on emotionally disturbed and psychologically disturbed individuals has really focused on genes and environment. And so some of the research I posted in the description box for you highlights that if a mother has a repeated negative affect, if her affective state, emotional state is a negative one, and there's some kind of psychopathology, narcissism, sociopathy, depression, anxiety, really intense symptoms though, OCD, that's really intense. It makes her controlling. It makes her, just kind of do whatever it takes to be in control. So let's say that this is the mom, right? This is your mom. We'll put it that way. If your mom continues to behave in an uncouth, emotionally and psychologically disturbed manner, research suggests that it's more likely to impact you negatively than if it were your dad. So let me go back over that. A mother's affective emotional state, if negative, can impact you more than your father's negative affective state. If your mom is in the picture, her issues will impact you more so than dad's issues. So that's one research study. The other research study highlighted that parental psychopathology, parental disturbance, often leads to a higher risk of your siblings, your mother's children, being just as unstable. So let's say, for example, you're like a client that I had 2.5 years ago, where mom and dad, they seemed okay for many years, but something happened to mom after mom's mother died. So grandma died, her mom died. And so mom was just really different from that point on. I remember her being this well put together woman, nice, nicely tucked hair, very perfect makeup. She was so cute and trim. And she wore these nice shirts tucked in and these nice sweaters, and she just looked so well put together, right? When her mom died, she, if you ask me, went into a psychotic break and she became emotionally disturbed. It wasn't enough to put her in the hospital though, but she was clearly disturbed. So what happened when her mom died is she started sleeping long hours during the week, during the day, literally like 12 to 15 hours a day. She would only get up every now and then, maybe 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. to go to the bathroom, get water, maybe some food. And she came to my office. Her hair was like completely just in disarray. Her makeup was falling under her eyes. She was dressed very disorganized. She had on mismatched socks and she wasn't trying to be stylish. She was a very different person. Could I have diagnosed her with depression at the time? No, because she didn't meet all the clinical criteria. Could I have diagnosed her as psychotic, even though she told me that she feels that her mother sits with her every night and talks to her? No, because she was grieving. So sometimes we as clinicians, we can't diagnose a mental health condition if a person is grieving. We really have to decipher between the two. Is it grief or is it a mental health issue? So I couldn't diagnose her. She was really on the spectrum of emotionally disturbed, and she was at the severe end, the severe end of emotionally disturbed. So that's an example of that. Sometimes if you have a parent like this, they can then increase the possibility or the risk that your sibling can also be as unstable as them. Okay. Somatoform disorders. Let me mention that. I'm going to go to the chat box. Somatoform disorders is really a psychological way of describing medical symptoms that has something to do with how you function. So if you, let's say, for example, have been depressed for most of your life, you may also have really chronic migraines. You may have cardiac spasms or any kind of heart issues. You may have chest pain all the time. You may have aching. My mother has fibromyalgia, where your body just aches and aches, and sometimes it's really hard to treat it. You may have neuropathy. You may have, sensitivity with your skin that's really severe. Some people say that if you rub their skin, it's sore, like they feel like their skin is sore. So you can have all these different conditions which can snap you. Let me just throw that out there. Research suggests that medical problems may explain psychological problems, and I think it does. But somatoform disorders can very much shift your attitude. It can shift your mindset. And so some individuals who are already emotionally disturbed can be pushed to the brink of insanity. Is that how it's said? I feel like I'm not saying that right. But it can really get you in a stuck position of almost psychosis. So sometimes individuals who are emotionally and psychologically disturbed are also dealing with medical symptoms and physiological symptoms that can really go against them. And that makes it 10 times worse. Okay, let me go to the chat box, guys, and then I'm going to tell you how all of this affects you. Imagine being in a relationship with someone like this, emotionally and psychologically disturbed, or growing up with a parent like this. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit here. Kyra Knowles, 144K, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm always glad to see you as well. Hope you're doing all right tonight. I'm going to put Gary's comment up here because my mother would agree. My grandmother would agree. I agree. I'm just going to let everybody look at that. Yeah. Let me also say too, Gary, that what can control the mind, again, is sometimes unresolved or very severe long-term medical conditions, parental psychopathology, and growing up under a parent who's unstable, right? And sometimes having this psychological paranoia. All of these things can shift and alter the mind as well. And that doesn't help. That doesn't help at all. Cherry's Jubilee, welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. Let me make one more point too, guys, before I continue on, that I should have mentioned earlier, that a person who is psychologically and emotionally disturbed, they tend to have what we call a dual or mixed personality. A dual or mixed personality. Really, it's the chameleon effect. It's like 1 minute you're this person and the next minute you're completely that different person over there. 1 minute you are calm, cool, and collected, and the next minute you are the complete opposite of what I know you to be. And so, it may not be something that you can hospitalize someone over, but it is very obvious that there's an instability and a disturbance there. You are too switchable. The chameleon effect really highlights how switchable a person can be. And it also highlights their need for stability and treatment. But because they may not meet all the diagnostic criteria needed to diagnose them, they may not get help. And so there you are trying to live a life with somebody who's switching in and out of personality and character. It can be very problematic. Jeanette, hello, and welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. L. Bundy, hello. Do you know the answer? Okay, I'm going to look for your comment. Did you give me the answer? Because I'm going to look in just a minute here. I'm going to look for the rest of your comment as I go along. Fairy Girl says, sadly, some of us had our wires crossed. Yeah, sometimes that's true. I hate to say it. You know, there's a reason why as a therapist, at least I do, a lot of other therapists do as well. There's a reason why we ask specific questions at the first appointment. You know, we have to know, did you achieve developmental milestones on time? Did you walk on time, talk on time? Did you grow correctly? Did you have some kind of developmental delay? Were there complications at birth? Were you able to work your way through emotional meltdowns as an infant? All of those things are important. Why? Because it tells us whether there's a biological disturbance or not. You know, a biological disturbance in quotation marks could say, this is an individual who didn't walk on time, didn't talk on time, had a really hard time sleeping as an infant, was really irritable and colicky, and didn't adjust to daycare or anything well at all. That often sets that person up for later problems down the road with ADHD, with conduct disorder, with oppositional defiant disorder, and sometimes even depression and anxiety. You know, exposure to trauma at a young age is also important. All of that can cross your wires, right, Fairy Girl? Danielle Young, I don't know if I welcomed you. Hello and welcome, says you hit the nail on the head about medication. Yeah. Okay, Access to Rome, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Access to Rome says, hello, Tamara, what kind of medicine do you prefer for people with PTSD? Well, I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm not giving medical advice. You really do want to talk to your doctor about this. But what seems to be the most helpful for individuals who are dealing with PTSD is sometimes anxiety medication. So we call those anti-anxiety medications like Xanax, Buspar. Sometimes we can also incorporate an antidepressant like Prozac. Fluoxetine is another word for it. Lexapro. Zoloft is an antipsychotic medication that can also be helpful. It really depends on what the symptoms are, So if you're having flashbacks all the time, you're having a hard time sleeping, you're on edge, you're snapping with people and you're just uptight, you can feel that pressure in your chest, you're having a really hard time functioning, then you may want to go with Zoloft. You may want to go with Lexapro, something that is an antidepressant and antipsychotic, but you do want to talk to your doctor about that. That's where I'm going to leave that to stay on topic here. Excuse me. M.N. Odell, my goodness. M.N. Odell, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Okay, I'm still looking for comments. Bear with me, guys. The Good Glow, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. And thank you so much for that very sweet comment. I really appreciate that. I'm really glad that you feel this is a safe place, a community. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm so glad. Anne of Hearts, hello and welcome. I'm going to star your comment, by the way, The Good Glow. Anne of Hearts, hello and welcome. Always glad to see you in a live chat as well. Kev Dower says, some of us felt like the only normal person growing up in a disturbed family. Excuse me. Absolutely. What do you do in a family where you feel like you are the quote unquote normal one and everybody else is the disturbed? I'm going to explain that to you in just a few minutes, okay? Bear with me because you're going to want to know. M. Hall, hello and welcome. I don't remember seeing you, so welcome. Yeah, well, M. Hall says being in prison helps people think far ahead when they are released. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah. MNL Odell says Luigi seems to be in the impaired reality testing category. I think so too. Most likely pain and pain meds that tip the scales. Yeah, if I were his attorney, and my cousin, she's my first cousin, she's an attorney and a judge in Atlanta. And she would have been a good, I think, judge and attorney for this particular situation. Because, if I were his attorney, the first thing that I would do is I need to pull his medical records. I need to look at his medical records. I need to know what happened here. And so I'm going to start with the medical records. I'm going to go as far back as I can to pull all his medical records. And on top of that, I need a very clear, distinct listing of all the medications that he has been on. And I also need to do a very extensive drug test. Boom. There's your case, because then you can make the case for impaired reality testing. Doesn't mean he's going to get away with murder, which I don't think he should. I think he has to pay the price. But at the same time, there needs to be a question of what happened here, right? So I agree with you, MNL Odell. His family also deserves to know what has actually happened here. And if medication and pain meds and maybe drug use and maybe pain on top of that and impaired reality testing sent him down this road, then I think that gives the family some comfort knowing that, okay, this is what has happened. I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to get into the Luigi spiral. I'm so over all the media. I really am. Fairy Girl says anger equals pain. Sometimes it does. Laura Fitz says only the crazy ones need therapy. And I told him those are the ones that need it the most. Well, Laura Fitz, you shouldn't be using that term crazy, but I get what you're saying. Your dad puts them in a category all of its own, right? That's over there for them, not for moi, I get it. I'm going to read your comment, Fairy Girl. Fairy Girl says, fear is catalyst. It's not real. It makes us angry, jealous, greedy. It makes us all sorts of things. But if we don't let it stop us, we're feeling courage. I get you. I had to let it sink in. I get you, Fairy Girl. Cherry's Jubilee. I'm so sorry. Cherry's Jubilee. Fear is sometimes the catalyst, right? I'm also going to pull from that and say sometimes fear is what triggers the emotional disturbance and psychological disturbance in some individuals. Just fear alone. It's very interesting. Jeanette says, sounds like a trauma bond. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. It's been cold lately. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for that. God bless you too. You're always so sweet. Glad to have you. I hope you're doing well. Keisha Monique, I haven't seen you in a long time. Welcome. Glad to see you. Kay Razy says it's great that culturally aware therapy is becoming a thing. Yes, I very much agree with that. Yeah, I agree. The Good Glow says the Black family motto is, yeah, you're right. I hate to say it. What happens in the family stays in the family. They want to keep their dark secrets in the house. Yes. And that's part of the problem. I have a lot of families that are very diverse. I see a lot of multi-ethnic clients. So, I have a lot of Chinese clients, Asian clients, Puerto Rican clients, Hispanic clients, Latino. I even have African clients, African American, Indian, Native American clients. If you put all of them into a pile, okay, I feel like I'm a part of some kind of interesting quilt when I'm in the office during the week, because I'm like seeing all these different people with different attitudes and mindsets, and cultures. And if we put all those people that come to my private practice into a pile, they all say it. They all say it. Literally, they all have a disposition that says what stays, what is talked about here, what is happening in my home, it stays here. It is not to get outside of these doors, you know. Even if they come to me for therapy, which a lot of them have done, which I'm so grateful for because they need help. You know, these families are going through a lot, but they're coming to me for therapy, but they also ask a million questions. Are you going to tell my PCP about this? Do you have to contact my boss? Do you have to tell my mother? Do you have to tell my husband? And it's this constant, you know? So you're right, the glow. The idea is what happens here stays here. It's not going any further than here. And that keeps a lot of people stuck, right? Wireless Sunday, Domingo Barboza. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Says, wow, amazing that they are conscious of the problem. Yes, they are. A lot of them are conscious of the problem. Yeah. And also, thank you, Jeanette, for that. I appreciate that. Okay. 1 or 2 more comments, guys. I'm going back to the content. James McDonald says treatment for certain people means that they have to face themselves and take accountability for all the bad stuff that they have done, which is too painful for them to admit to and face. Very much agree. 100%. I'm going to star your comment because I very much agree with that. Yes. Yeah. I think I may have said this earlier as well. It's really difficult for people who have emotional and psychological disturbance to say, okay, I'm going to make that decision to get help. Why? Because they know there's going to be a medical record of some kind. We can't just do therapy with you and not have some kind of medical record. Years ago, when I started as a private practice therapist, I think I was in like my 8th or 9th year of the field. And I remember starting in private practice all by myself, finally, decorated the office, did some changing of the space, all of that. It was such a cozy little office, my first office. And the first client that I got, that month that I finally opened up the doors, was somebody that said, I never wanted to have therapy. And I remember asking her why. And she says, because I don't want you to create a medical record. I don't want you to say that I have a problem because that makes it firm and true. And I also don't want you to give me any of those questionnaires that's going to try to get inside of my mind. Do you guys think she came back to see me after she left? She totally disappeared. Why? Because I told her, I'm sorry, I work with your insurance company and I do have to create a medical record. She didn't want that. It held her accountable for way too much. Cheyenne Morgan, hello and welcome. I think I said hello to you. Let me just read your comment. What are your thoughts on manic symptoms and potentially disturbed individuals? Sometimes manic symptoms can be a sign of impending doom, right? Sometimes mania or manic symptoms can be the complete opposite of depression. So if you are, swinging between 2 poles, right? 1 minute you're depressed, the next, we know it doesn't work that way, but just bear with me. 1 minute you're depressed, next minute you are manic. To me, if you continue to swing between those 2 poles all the time, or you lean heavily on being very manic and energetic and you can't sleep and you can't think and you're not eating and you think you're powerful and you're grandiose. Is that emotional and psychological disturbance? Yes. Can it sometimes be overlooked? Yes, because people who are on way too much caffeine can act like that. People who are just anxious and nervous socially can also act as if they are manic. And individuals who have a history of PTSD. So sometimes these individuals could be experiencing a manic episode and we never see it. Friends and family may not see it as well because it's really difficult to identify mania unless you know what it is. I hope that makes sense. That's my thoughts on that, Cheyenne. Cherry's Jubilee, thank you so much for being a member of 2 months. You're amazing. Thank you so much for that. And for all the super chats and all the support to the channel and all your comments. Thank you so much. That is not me highlighting you. YouTube is highlighting you for being a member for 2 months. So thank you so much. Cherry's Jubilee says, all are worthy of unconditional love. Yeah, very much agree. All right, guys, before I go to the rest of the content, Dr. Right Life, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for that book. I definitely will look into that. That's one book I have not got my hands on yet. Okay, give me 1 second, guys. I'm just scrolling to make sure. Robert Redmond's Clip Channel, hello and welcome. I'm glad to see you. Thank you so much for that. I hope this was a helpful topic. Tammy Nicely, hello and welcome. I hope you're doing well. Tammy Nicely says, Tamara, you are talking about my mother. Oh boy. I wonder if tomorrow I'll be talking about her too. Join me, okay? The psychology of the criminal mind. And we're not going to talk too much about crime. We're going to talk about how the criminal mind actually functions in everyday society, and also how the criminal mind functions in family that is toxic and the dynamic is unhealthy. So you're going to want to be there. Okay. I think I'm getting most of you. Kay Razy says permanent chronic pain would definitely have an impact on your mental health. I very much agree. Tammy Nicely says she'd clean constantly, and while doing this, she'd be talking about stuff in a kind of angry fashion, justifying herself about. Did you finish that, Tammy Nicely? Whatever has got her back up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like this angry, I used to see when somebody, what am I trying to say? In one of my residential programs, when I first started out as the therapist, the staff on the floor that I was on would be running the vacuum, because in a residential treatment facility, the people live there and they're getting treatments. I was one of the therapists there, and she's vacuuming and just vacuuming and vacuuming. And she's literally talking out loud to herself. And, I made a joke with her. I'm like, do you need to see me? My doors are open. I'm here until 9:00. We laughed it off, but she would literally just angrily clean, and she would be talking out loud to herself. Her husband was, he needed some help. Okay. Ronald Zion says, is dual personality the same as BPD? I would say no. Dual personality or mixed personality could sound like borderline personality disorder. But really what I mean by dual personality is a person who, switches up on you and they become a totally different person. So you may have a really calm, cool, collected individual who is stable 1 year. Okay. But now that we're in a whole new year, let's say 2025, they're now acting a way that they're not. They're dressing differently. They're talking differently. They've kind of gone off and lived in a different state. They're acting like they are completely detached from who they were last year. Dual or mixed personality. The other thing that you can look for, it doesn't have to be physical changes. It can also just be emotional. He used to be really sweet, and all of a sudden he's become this mean, angry person, or it can be an individual who switches up on you every other day. Have you had that coworker or that partner at a job where you walk in 5 days out of the week and say, hi, how's your morning going? And they speak back and they smile with you. You guys even got lunch. But now it's the following Monday and they're acting like they don't see you. They're ignoring you, downplaying you, minimizing you, maybe even being a little condescending. So that's what I mean by dual personality, but it would be different from BPD. You're my last one. Annabis, the opener of ways. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you tonight. Let's get back to the content. Okay, guys. So how does this affect you? You ready for this? If you grow up in a family where there is subclinical symptoms, or there's an individual who's emotionally or psychologically disturbed, you can experience several types of loneliness. So we're going to go through them briefly. 1 is situational loneliness. 2, I'm going to define them in a minute. 2 is developmental loneliness. 3 is internal loneliness. And 4 is existential loneliness. Existential loneliness is this, that I have this deep-seated loneliness that makes me feel like I am the only one upon the earth who understands me, who is my best friend, and who is there to support my every move. I am the only person in my world that I can trust. Existential loneliness. It's this deep seated core. I am ultimately alone, no matter what. Okay. Existential loneliness. The other kind of loneliness that research suggests is possible is situational loneliness. And really, this hits you when you make a shift in your life. So let's say, for example, you've been living with your mom who's narcissistic. You've been living with your dad who's a sociopath, to say the least, and you're tired of both of your parents. You decide to move out. You don't want to be anywhere near them. So you move out of the house, right? You may find yourself over time growing into your new place, but the reality of being alone is really depressing. And the reality of not having anybody else in that house with you or that apartment with you is kind of chilling, right? So situational loneliness is I'm by myself in this new situation and I don't know how to manage it. I don't know how to manage it. When you have an emotionally or psychologically starved family member, or you're in a relationship with someone like this, there's often this constant seeking of security, safety, solace, you know? And so you may find yourself jumping from one house, apartment to the next, or one situation to the next. And you can over time develop these internal feelings of just ultimately being alone and doing all of this on your own, you know? It's like fighting your battles all by yourself. Situational loneliness. Developmental loneliness can hit you when you've been raised in a household with parents who are emotionally and psychologically disturbed. What happens with developmental loneliness is you may find yourself feeling way behind or like you've regressed in your development. You may not feel like you're at a mature age. You may not feel like you are emotionally and psychologically mature. Somewhere deep down inside, you still kind of see yourself as a child. You know, you're still young and trying to figure the world out. So we call that developmental loneliness. You know, you kind of feel like you've regressed, or you're a child, or you don't have the ability to be an adult and stand as an adult would. So that's developmental loneliness. Internal loneliness is this internal sense that nothing that I do, I'm in control of. So there's something known as locus of control. Locus of control. And if it's external, locus of control is basically what you feel that you have control over. Some people have an internal locus of control, meaning that they may feel like they have to study really, really hard to pass that exam. And if they don't pass that exam, it's because of something that they did wrong. I didn't study enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not, internal. But an external locus of control says, I can do everything in my power to survive, but what really makes the decision is things out there. And so that's external. Those things out there, the government, politics, my boss, my mother, all these people have control over me. So if you have an external locus of control and you feel like there's no personal power that you hold, you may have internal loneliness. Okay. Situational loneliness, developmental loneliness, internal loneliness, and existential loneliness. The other thing is maladaptive schemas. Maladaptive schemas. You could go throughout life believing, based on the schemas, the mentality, the cognitions that you have developed over time. You could approach the world feeling like you are completely incapable of positive things happening to you. You could feel like you are totally incapable of loving somebody else. You could feel like you are just an awful person. It's called a maladaptive schema. It's the way that you process and see life. And if you've grown up under instability and disturbance, it's possible that you can develop these negative or maladaptive schemas. There's also acute and chronic stress, which has an impact on your immune system. Acute stress could be a few weeks to 6 months of just agony, psychological, emotional, medical, physical, and chronic is 6 months and beyond. And so you can start feeling acute and chronic stress. And it also pushes your body and your brain into fight or flight mode. And you can stay, almost in a cyclic pattern. You can stay in fight or flight mode where it's like you have nowhere to jump off the boat. Your body and your brain is constantly fighting a battle, and that drains you, right? You may also find yourself experiencing something we call iatrogenic neurosis and psychosis. Iatrogenic neurosis and psychosis. Here's what it means. You're struggling as it is. You're dealing with somebody who's emotionally and psychologically disturbed. Because of that, they disturb you. My mom used to say all the time, disturbed people disturb you. Disturbed people disturb you. And so growing up with somebody like this, having parents like this, being in a relationship with somebody like this, you may find yourself in need of therapy. You may also find yourself in need of stress management. So you go to a doctor for that. But what can happen in that situation is whatever that therapist does, whatever that psychologist or psychiatrist prescribes you or do, whatever they do, whatever that medical doctor also does, can actually cause a disorder or some kind of emotional and psychological instability within you. So it's almost like a provider causing more pain, causing more emotional disturbance within you. You just went to them for help because you're dealing with an unstable person in your world. You go to a therapist, you go to a psychiatrist, you go to a psychologist for help, and all they do is make it worse. So we call that iatrogenic neurosis and iatrogenic psychosis. They can actually create, and sometimes well-meaning doctors can create a problem within you, and it can get worse over time. So you may experience your own disturbance, right? You're seeking help. That therapist or doctor doesn't do anything that's helpful, and all they do is exacerbate the problem, right? So now you're dealing with your own issues. So that can happen. There's also internal resentment, anger, and hostility that you can develop over time. Nobody wants to be attached to an unstable individual, right? That turns on them, makes them feel bad, talks against them, is causing complex PTSD, is angry all the time, is threatening. Nobody wants to be attached to that. But if you're attached to somebody like this and you can't really get away, you can develop internal resentment over time. And what does that do to you? It adds more burden to your shoulders, and it creates insecurities within you. You may not feel safe. You may not feel mature enough to handle everything. And you may actually have your own psychotic break, because you just get pushed to that, This is interesting, right? I'm going to stop here because tomorrow I'm going to use tomorrow's conversation to give you some more insights on this very topic. So I'm going to stop here. Let me go to the chat box, see what you guys are saying, and then wrap up. This is a lot, right, guys? Were you able before tonight's live chat to determine what does psychological disturbance mean versus mental illness? Were you able to do that versus a personality disorder? Because if not, I hope this was helpful. The way you want to see it is like this. An emotionally and psychologically disturbed individual has all the possibilities of becoming sick or unwell or threatening or problematic. They're just not there yet. And so we categorize these people as having subclinical symptoms. If we go over here, now we're talking about mental illness. Now we're talking about personality disorders, and they will have a medical record or they need one because they need a lot of help. We can actually diagnose these people over here with a psychological condition or a problem. We can't diagnose these people over here, even though they need help. Hope that made sense. Okay, let me go to the chat box and then we're going to wrap up. Raymond Vincent Garcia, hello and welcome. Glad to see you tonight. Thank you, Cherry's Jubilee. I'm gonna read your comment, Fairy Girl. Fairy Girl says, I am not a doc nor play one on TV, but I can say it's worth it to try when the bad place seems the only way to help others not suffer. Yeah, because of you. I agree with that. I agree with that, Fairy Girl. I agree. Yeah. You may be threatened by it, but it is worth it. That's what I'm pulling from your comment. Okay. Azatara. I don't know. I probably messed that up. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat because I don't remember seeing you. Azatara says, I prefer an intestinal detox. Do you guys know how to do intestinal detoxes? Is it ayahuasca? I feel like that's the right pronunciation, but I'm not sure. But they are internal detoxes. You can actually drink loose leaf tea for a detox. Sometimes if you are struggling with depression and anxiety, detoxes can be really, really helpful. You don't want the fake detox that you get in a tea bag on the shelf. You want the loose leaf tea. That's the best way to do it, but it can be very helpful if you're depressed and overwhelmed. Thank you for saying that. Evangelist Marvella Harbin, hello and welcome from California. Glad to see you tonight. I don't remember seeing you, so welcome. All right, I'm just trying to get final comments. I'm tired tonight, guys. I don't know if you can tell. I'm like stuttering and having a really hard time. Star says mental illness, substance abuse, dementia, denial, enablers, a no-win situation. Yeah, thanks for putting that in there. That makes sense. This led to my no contact choice years ago. Save yourself first. As bad as that sounds, it's crucial. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Raymond Vincent Garcia says, my wife can relate to the topic of developmental trauma. Yeah. Her parents say different stories about her milestones. Her older sister and her first word was pizza, not, oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Developmental trauma, or we can also call it developmental loneliness. You know, you just feel like you're in this developmental stage all by yourself and nobody else is there with you. And that could be a regressed stage, you know what I mean? Or you may even be ahead of the game, but developmental loneliness basically means you were back there by yourself and you stayed back there for quite some time, you know? It's pretty sad. I have a sweet little baby. He's such a marshmallow. I love hugging him. And he gives the best little hugs. He is 4 years old, guys, okay? And he came in to see me today. And I just love that little guy. He's so, so cute. And he's been through so much. He's been through literally 9 to 10 foster homes. Can you believe that? And he's 4. And I just love that we have a great bond, and you know, as therapist and client. He's just a beautiful baby, but let me say, he is behind in his development, but he's coming along because he now has adopted parents, and they are just really good parents, especially his adopted mom. But he was dealing with, I think, a form of developmental loneliness because he was just stuck in infancy for so long, you know, not potty trained, couldn't really say words, couldn't really dress himself, you know, was really detached from what other 2, 3, and 4-year-olds do, you know. So developmental loneliness can be pretty impactful. He's working through it, but this little guy has a long way to go, you know. It's very sad. Maggie M10, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says, hi, Tamara, and all third time catching alive. I just want to say a big thank you, as always, for your content and your insightful comments in the chat. Thank you so much, and you're welcome. That's so kind. I appreciate you. I really do, and I'm so glad this channel is helpful. Express I am, hello. Welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I'm reading your comment, but I'm not going to read it out loud. There's a reason for that, because I'm not quite sure if we're talking about the same thing, and I don't want to confuse anyone, but I did put it up there. The Good Glow says, I had a wonderful time at our office-wide holiday party. I received an award for 35 years of service. Wow, congratulations. That's amazing. My grandmother, my late grandmother, she was such a hard worker. She worked at the Marriott Hotel. She worked at the Hilton Hotel. And she also worked at, I can't think of the other hotel. Comfort Inn. It might have been Comfort Inn. And she worked those three places for 40 years. And when you get an award for service, it's so nice, right? So I totally get you. But the Good Glow says 35 years of service and did the Rich Home Quan Flex dance when they called me. No, you did not. No, you did not. She goes on to say, discovered a small part of me. Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Congratulations. That's wonderful. Okay. Dawn 1. Uh-oh. Sorry, fairy girl. Dawn 1, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Violence is not all right. I agree. I agree. I agree. Just to kind of stay on topic here, I understand that a lot of people are upset with insurance companies. I don't appreciate how insurance companies, do things either, And being a provider with 15 years of experience, all I've done is worked and spoken with insurance companies. And I remember years ago when I was in a residential treatment facility seeing several kids who were on the lockdown unit, I would have to have an insurance call every 30 days, every 38 days, 28, to 30 days, every 28 to 30 days to prove to the insurance company that my client, who was 7, 9, 10, 15, 18, 21, needed to continue to get help. And guess what? Sometimes the insurance company would say, he's not meeting our clinical criteria to continue to receive treatment in your facility. So we're going to stop payment of his services today. That's it. Click. And sometimes the insurance company would call the family and offer resources. Sometimes I would be left with that burden of having to tell the family, I'm sorry, your insurance has said no more treatment, So I understand insurance as well, and it can be very frustrating. However, does that mean that you plot, take every step you can to be unseen or not seen? Does that mean that you plot and premeditate how to do something to somebody who represents a big system in society? No. So I agree, Don Juan. Absolutely not. It's not the answer. It's the wrong way to go. It doesn't make sense at the end of the day. It doesn't. Corey Dixon, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I don't remember seeing you, so welcome. Corey Dixon says, love your show. I've learned so much. Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad. Couple more comments, guys, and then we are going to wrap up. Yaya says, fear, fear, a good thing for growth. Well, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. If you're not afraid, you don't learn how to fight. If you're not afraid, you don't know what it's like to be grateful sometimes, right? If you've never had to deal with down times, you don't know what it's like to have good times sometimes, right? So I agree. Cam says, in your experience, what is the typical age that you see people recognizing and leaving the toxicity within their family? Kim, that's a great question. Usually 21, 18, 25, and sometimes 40. Sometimes that old, 40 years old. And basically it's either one situation that has broken down communication within the family, or it's years and years of abuse that somebody just says, you know what, I'm not going to deal with this, I have an adolescent right now who is saying, I'll be so very glad when I hit 18 because I'm out of here. Gary Bennett says, fear can be helpful. It makes you aware of reality and death. So fear can bring you to God. Yeah, for protection and help. I very much love that. That's so beautiful. I love that. Wireless Sunday, Dominga Barbosa says, the attitude is so limiting to anyone who is under their influence. Yeah, that's so true. Disturbed people can really reel you in, and have you thinking and behaving like them. Elvie, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. I don't remember seeing you, so welcome. Elvie says, that's the issue with my family. They refuse to take accountability. Absolutely. Yep. China Doll 77, hello and welcome. And yes, you caught a live. So glad to see you. Jeremy Robinson, hello and glad to see you as well. Says, I agree. It's also toxic to tell a child or children that what happens in the family stays in the family, and it is something that must be broken. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yep. Last couple of comments before we go. Ivan Kwan, I hope I said that correctly. No, Yvonne. Is it Yvonne? Kwan, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Says hello and greetings from Ireland. That's amazing. Welcome, welcome. Says, is a toxic person always narcissist? Isn't it true that toxic or spiritual entities that take over a person without a soul or with a wounded soul? Yeah, absolutely. Here's what I would say, that not everybody who's toxic is narcissistic. Not everybody who's toxic is mentally ill. Not everybody who's toxic also has a personality disorder. We just talked about evil on this channel and evil and dark behavior. And I believe that some people are just born evil. They are born with a dark mindset, a dark soul. And so everything that they do is based on that, and they are harmful. They are no good for society. There was no purpose to their life, to be very honest, but to cause pain to somebody else. I don't think a toxic person always has a clinical syndrome, a mental disorder, a personality disorder. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. I do see you, Haley, in the chat box. You know who you are. So Haley, I'm going to put you up here. Okay. Between the holiday and having a long waiting list, I've not been able to call anybody back and schedule. So what I suggest, you can email me at my email address in the description box. I'm willing to at least, look over your email, put you on my waiting list, and see if I can get you in. Right now, my waiting list is March. So from now to March. So by the end of March, I should be able to take on new clients. But for right now, I am literally slammed when it comes to clients. Tammy Nicely says, to the good glow, I grew up like this. I'm going to leave it on the screen. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to scroll before we go. Helene Webster, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. And my last comment of the night. Daima, you're my last comment of the night. Daima, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Daima says, I've heard the other day, forgiveness doesn't make the other person right. It makes you free. Not applicable in every situation, but I like it. Yeah, absolutely. It frees you, right? For those of you I could not get to, forgive me, but know I love you, and I'm grateful for your participation on the channel and your support of the channel. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. I think you're going to love that conversation. There's going to be some new terms in there. I know you guys like the terminology, the language, so you're going to get that tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful Friday. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you Saturday. Bye-bye.